Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something major that happened recently, the 2025 Pakistan-India conflict. Our goal here is simple. Cut through all the noise, figure out what actually happened during that really intense time based on the sources we have. Think of this as your quick way to get up to speed on a pretty critical moment. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, definitely. It's a really stark modern example of how these things can flare up, especially, between nuclear powers. Understanding the specifics, the sequence of events, it really matters if you want to grasp what's going on globally.
Right. So to get that understanding, we need to start at the beginning. The trigger. The Pahalgam terror attack, April 22nd, 2025. The sources, they paint a grim picture. 26 civilians killed in Indian-administered Kashmir. Tragic. And right away there was this ambiguity. The resistance front claimed it initially, but India very quickly pointed the finger at Pakistan-based groups.
And that accusation, that's key. India's response showed they weren't seeing this as just some isolated incident. They acted like it had, well, state backing, or at least state tolerance. And that, in their view, justified a much bigger response. Like suspending the Indus Waters Treaty, that's a huge deal, governing water sharing. And the sources mentioned simulated water releases off-season. These weren't small gestures. It was a very clear signal, a way of showing the kind of leverage India felt to have.
Okay, so that initial framing, blaming Pakistan-based groups, and then these big moves like messing with the water treaty,
Yeah.
what did that mean for what happened next?
It just massively raised the stakes, right? Instantly. By framing it that way, India basically gave itself the green light for, well, a significant military response, not just chasing terrorists, but a state-on-state thing.
It became a direct confrontation.
Exactly. Moved it from just sort of an internal security problem to, yeah, a direct clash between the two countries.
And that clash, it didn't take long to materialize. We went from those initial moves, the treaty suspension and so on, to really clear signs of escalation starting around April 24th. Airspace getting shut down, border skirmishes along the line of control, the Lost Sea really heating up. This wasn't just talk anymore. It felt like things were getting serious fast.
Very fast. And then, May 7th, India launched Operation Sindoor. We're talking a proper military operation here.
Yeah.
Missile strikes, airstrikes, not just a small border incident. And the targets, according to the sources, were described as terrorist sites across Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir. That sounds pretty widespread, not localized.
Right, and Pakistan didn't just sit back. Their response was fast, too, and just as direct. They hit back with their own drones, missile strikes, plus heavy mortar shelling in places like Poonch. So this wasn't like a proxy thing. This was full-on direct military engagement, even if it was short. This is where it gets really interesting, both sides launching direct attacks.
Exactly. And what's really striking is how short that intense phase was. All that fighting, the direct military stuff, it basically lasted 4 days, wrapped up by May 10th with a ceasefire brokered by the U.S. Just 4 days. That speed, for a conflict between nuclear powers,
Yeah.
it suggests a different kind of calculation now, maybe. Military action moving faster than old-school diplomacy, forcing quick intervention.
And let's be clear, this wasn't just another border skirmish. The sources really stress the history here. They call it the most severe military crisis between the two nuclear-armed neighbors in decades.
Decades. That's why the diplomacy part is so crucial. The fact that it took U.S. intervention to stop just 4 days of intense fighting.
Yeah.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about how fragile things are there. If you connect this to the bigger picture, it just screams how vital international mediation is
Yeah.
all the time to stop things from spiraling completely out of control.
Okay, so the shooting stops May 10th. But then a different kind of battle starts up, right? The narrative war. India came out swinging with some pretty specific claims. Their Air Force chief said they shot down 6 Pakistani aircraft. That included, 5 fighter jets and an AWACS plane. That's a big claim. And AWACS is basically a flying command center. And they added this really technical detail claiming one shoot down happened from a record 300-kilometer distance using S-400 missiles. That's Russia's top-tier air defense system. Very specific.
Very specific. And what's fascinating is Pakistan's immediate reaction. They flat out called India's claims implausible, politically motivated, essentially, which, makes you think about why states say what they say after a conflict. It's not always just about the facts on the ground. Both sides sort of pushing their narratives, highlighting their strength or maybe their restraint, trying to shape how everyone internationally and at home saw what happened. It's a part of the conflict itself, really.
Which leads to the big question for anyone watching this stuff. How do you figure out what's real when both sides are managing the story so heavily, especially when the stakes are this high? So let's just quickly recap what we've covered in this deep dive on the 2025 conflict. Started with that awful Pahalgam attack, then the really quick escalation, India's Operation Sindoor, Pakistan hitting back, boiling over into that intense 4-day fight, and then afterwards this whole clash of narratives, claims, and counterclaims.
Yeah. And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about is this. That pattern of a short, sharp, intense conflict, followed by these wildly different stories, how might that play out in future crises between nuclear states? And it really hammers home that challenge, doesn't it? Trying to sort fact from, well, state-spun narratives. Critical thinking becomes absolutely essential.
It really does. So as you go on, maybe just keep that in mind, the nature of information when things get tense, and why it's so important to look critically at official statements, especially after what we've just discussed. Thanks for diving deep with us today.